welcome back, guys. In the last video, just a brief recap, we have successfully created a new block B folder and we have initialized a new Node.js project. This Node.js project is going to be a backend system for a blogging application. So here we have app.js and we have package.json. The app.js is currently serving as the entry point of our application, and then the package.json contains the metadata of our application. Okay, so because we are working with index.js, so let me change this back to index.js, and now I have stats. I'll change this back to node index. Again, the script section and the stats command in our package.json. I have node index. So if I come here, let me delete this off, and then we can get started with this video. Okay, so I mentioned to you guys already that we are going to be creating a web server in this video. And the reason we are creating a web server, even though we are using Node.js, is because Node.js itself is not a full-fledged web server. I've mentioned this over and over again that Node.js is a runtime environment that helps us to handle JavaScript code outside of a web browser. So Node.js itself is not a full-fledged web server. So what we need a full-fledged, we need a web server to handle, to be able to manage middleware. We need a middleware we are going to be building later on. We need a web server to be able to send static files over the network. We need a server to be able to automatically handle HTTP requests. Some of these are functions that Node.js being a runtime environment cannot directly give to us. But when we install Node.js, it comes inbuilt with a package. This package can help us to create our own web server in our projects. This package is called HTTP. HTTP. Last year, I mentioned to you guys that your web browser comes inbuilt with different APIs already installed on it, so different APIs. And I also mentioned that Node.js comes inbuilt with different packages and modules installed on it. So HTTP is one of the packages that come inbuilt with Node.js. So if you want to create a web server, we don't have to install HTTP from scratch again. It already comes inbuilt with the Node.js we've installed. There are other packages. There's a long list of other packages that come already installed with Node.js. There's crypto, there's FS, there's util, and so on and so forth. We're going to be talking about some of these concepts later on, and you can head over to the official Node.js website to see the different packages that come inbuilt with Node.js. But for now, let's just work with HTTP to create our web server. Now, the first thing we are going to do is, instead of our index.js file, we are going to be importing this HTTP. So we have const HTTP equals require HTTP. Now, this simple line is how we import a module in Node.js. Now, if you have used a library like React or Next.js before, you are probably used to the import the package name from the link. So we import, if we're using React, it should be import HTTP from HTTP. But now, because we are using Node.js and Node.js uses CommonJS ES5, I believe I mentioned that last year, that Node.js uses ES5. So this is the way to import packages in ES5. So we have const HTTP equals require HTTP. Now this HTTP is what we are going to be using to handle, to create our server and to start listening on our ports. So I'm going to come here and say const server. We have talked about variable declaration and variable initialization. So I have created a new variable called server. I'm going to be assigning this to it, http.createServer. http.createServer, which is a function. http.createServer. So again, variable declaration, initialization. So we have const server equals http.createServer. So create server now is a higher order function. It takes a function as a parameter, and the function it takes as a parameter in this case is a callback function. Last year I mentioned to you guys that we are going to be making use of callback functions a whole lot in Node.js, and this callback function. Okay, this is the callback function that create server takes. Callback function. Now this callback function again takes at least two parameters. That's the request and response. I'll come here and say request, let me type it out, and response. Request and response. What is request and what is response? Now we are building APIs for web applications to consume. The incoming request is managed by this request parameter, and what we send back is managed by this response parameter. That's just like the basic explanation for it. So we have request and response. Request, what is coming in, and response, what is going out. So if you're over on request, you have incoming message, and then response is the outcome, is what we are sending out. So what we are sending back to to the machine or the server that is making the request. So again, just brief recap, we are importing HTTP, and we have const server equals http.createServer. CreateServer is a function that comes in between our HTTP. We don't have to install HTTP from scratch again. So we have CreateServer. CreateServer is a function, and a higher order function. It takes this callback function as a parameter, and this function now is now taking request and response as parameters. Later on, we are going to talk about other parameters that our callback function can take, but for now, let's just work with request and response. So I'm going to come here and say, okay, so let's listen. So we have server.listen, sorry, server.listen. So I'm going to, before that, let me do const port equals 8, okay, let me use 8,000. And then I'll do server.listen. This takes the port that I just created. Now, what is a port? A port is like a temporary location. A port is like a temporary location on our local device. So what we are saying is we want to create a temporary location to manage network traffic, to manage the income and outgoing requests. So on this local device, on my local device now, I have created a temporary virtual location on port 8,000 that is going to be handling this my blogging platform. So it's going to be handling every traffic, that every network traffic, the incoming and the response that we send back. And then I'm going to be adding this that says console.log app listening on port 8080. Okay, 8,000. So you have const port equals 8,000, and then server.listen app listening on port 8,000. The reason because this is still a small application, that's why I have this written hard coded like this. When we start building large applications, we are going to be using something called .env. But for now, let's just work with this one. Const port equals 8,000. So if I come here and so technically now we have created our basic web server. This is how to create your basic web server. You import HTTP, you create server, and then you listen on the port. It's like creating a virtual location on your device. Okay, I'm going to say, so with this now we can make requests to our application, to this application that we've just created. But before we make applications, I'm going to let me just add this line so we can see it when we start testing. Oh yeah, response.end. I am working properly. Yeah. So save this, open my terminal, let me clear this, and then npm start. Now in one of the last classes we installed Postman. I mentioned to you guys that because we are not going to be downloading, we are not going to be building front-end applications, we are going to need something to mirror requests to our APIs. So we are using Postman for that, and I'll click on Open Workspace Overview, and then click on this plus icon here. So let me see. Okay, app listening on port 8,000. That means what we did is working properly. So app listening on port 8,000. So I'm going to come here and enter HTTP, which is like we want to browse the internet. I'll do HTTP /localhost, and then port 8,000, because we are 8,000. What we have here, port 8,000. I'm going to do localhost 8,000. And then if I hit send, and see I'm working properly. I'm working properly because this is what we have here on line 5. I'm working properly. If I update this, let me say I am now working properly. Yeah. And I hit, okay, sorry, I have to start and close and start my server again. For now, we are going to be closing and starting the server in subsequent classes. In I think the next class, I'm going to talk about how to what package we need to install so that every time we make changes to our application, we don't have to close our server and start it again. So, but for now, let's just work like this. So npm start, and then app listing on port 8000. So if I come here, click on send, I am now working properly, which is what I added on my line 5. See, if you click on here, headers, you see dates, connection, keep alive, content length. I should mention to you guys that the headers just serve as the metadata again that we are sending to whatever is making request to our API, to the APIs we are creating, or to the server that we just created. So we are saying a meta, we are saying anytime we send a response to you, this is how we want you to manage that response. It's just like an instruction. So that's okay. Let me teach you how to. Let's first create an header here. So I'll say response dot set header. So I'm going to do that before we have response dot end. That's why I added before we have response dot end. Then one of the most common headers is content type. This sending content type. So let me use it. So I'm going to use content type text/plain, which is what we are doing already. So I'm doing. So if I come here, close this, and start it again, npm start, just a couple of seconds. Why are you delaying? npm starts should not be taking this long. Okay, app listening on port 8000. So if I come here, click on send, I guess I am now working properly. And if you notice here, headers is now 5. You see content type text/plain. So I can send more there. I can add more. I can change this from text/plain to application/JSON. Okay, let me update this to reflect what we are sending. I'll say JSON the stringify. If you don't understand it, it's fine. We'll talk about it later on. But just watch what I'm doing, and then if I close my server, I am hoping you won't waste my time now. npm starts, and it is wasting my time. Come on, I don't know what's going on with my device today, so bear with me. npm starts. We have app listening. Okay, so if I come to Postman, click on send, I see that content type has changed to reflect what I've just done, which is application/JSON. And if you check body, you see I am now working properly. Another thing I can send is status code. Let me send my status code or status code. I'll say the default is 200, but I'm still going to add it anyway. So if I come here, the default is already 200, but I am adding 200 so we can see that we can also send status code to the what is making the request. So I have npm start. So if I come here, click on send, see everything is still working the way it's supposed to work. When we start when we start building up larger applications, you see the different types of status code we can have. So for now, all you need to pick from this video is to create basic your basic web server. This is how you do it. http.create server, and then you add your status code, your header, and then you end it with the response you are sending back, the response you want to display on what is making the request. Again, don't forget to create a port, which is like a temporary virtual location that handles network requests and response, the traffic on your local device and you listen to that port with server.listen. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about how to handle different routes, because all we are doing now is we are just making a request to our home route. We are not handling different. We are not making requests to different routes. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about how to make requests to different routes in our application. So see you guys soon. Yeah.